Hey guys, it's Your Kingdom Come, and we're back here with another podcast, and it's great to be back after a week of no podcast. Well, you did put in the effort, I would say. Those 20 minutes were yeah, you know. So, but without me,
it just wasn't as good.
It just wasn't as good. No,
just,
I'm joking.
there was a missing
missing puzzle piece.
A missing puzzle piece. Yes, yeah. Yes. Every time I looked over, I said, "Isn't that right, Colby?" And I was like, "Oh, he's not there. Okay."
Yeah, and you didn't have the big mic whams I do. You know.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's what we need Colby for.
Yeah,
the mic whams.
Yep,
specifically
the mic whams, the accents, and the great intro that you guys get every week. Don't you love the intro? Comment down below if you like the intro.
Yeah, and comment down below if you hate my intro. And I'll comment down below because I hate my intro.
And then comment if you hate my outro. I can never do the outro. I always talk about this. I can ever do it.
You always talk about like blessing and blessed, and I hope you get blessed.
It's like a prosperity teacher. Yeah. It's like Joe Osteen.
One thing before we jump into today's content. Last week I mentioned on the show that just kind of some scheduling stuff for next year, and I want to clarify something that we kind of, we decided to tweak just a little bit. So last week, I think I mentioned that the flagship show is going to be on Thursday nights, every Thursday night at 6:00. We've talked about it, and we decided to, hey, you know what? We're going to take a risk. We're going to do something a little different. So this year, starting in the new year, we're going to set up the flagship show as like I don't know. What do you call it? Like a Friday night live type of deal? I don't know. Like that type of thing where you go on there. It's going to be a little later. I think we're going to do a 7:00 start. So, you can grab your popcorn, grab your family. If that's what you guys are into, watching YouTube on a Friday night, I don't know. But yes, so it's going to be Friday nights. It's going to be every other Friday night, 7:00 p.m. And on Thursday nights, we're still going to have something. I had mentioned last week on the show that I was going to be doing a show where I react to things that are going on just out in the world, current events, and react to theological, political maybe sometimes, or like church, you would call it ecclesiological or something.
Ooh, there's
the big word, right?
Scholared.
PhD. But anyway, I'm gonna be reacting to and dealing with current events from a biblical perspective. So you can catch me at 6:00 on Thursday nights, every Thursday night. So that's every Thursday night, you're going to have me. And then every other Friday night, we have our Friday night special. 7:00, the two of us, just as you know us, same type of deal. We're going to be trying to, beef up the set, beef up the production a little bit, you know. But anyway, just figured we'd let you know. So to be clear, 6:00 Thursday nights, you're going to have me. 7:00 every other Friday night, you're going to have us on the flagship show. So anyway.
And yeah, I can't wait. We were talking about this before, and we're honestly looking forward to this upcoming year. It's going to take some time, but we're looking forward to really making this look very, very nice for you guys. We really want to really make it nice, and especially because it's Friday night, kind of like a Friday night special, where you just kick back, put the TV on, whatever. If you got Apple TV, Roku TV, put it on, and grab some popcorn, make sure it's nice and buttery so it lasts you, and you take a couple sips of Coca-Cola while you're doing it. That's my personal preference. You might hate Coca-Cola, you might be a Pepsi guy. We might have a war on this podcast right now. Anyways,
I hate Pepsi, so you're not gonna have to fight me.
All right, good. Anyways, but yeah, we're really looking forward to that, and we really want to, have a really nice production for you guys. And anyways, so today's podcast was brought by one of our subscribers who commented one of our videos. And if you have the comment, so I'll let you read it.
Yes, this is by someone who I think calls himself William Kramer. Hopefully I got your name right, man. So this is the comment. I'm just gonna read it, and we're gonna react to it. I said last week that we love when you guys dictate what we talk about. So hey, that's what we're doing. We're gonna deliver a little faster than you thought, William. I bet. All right. This is what he said. Hey guys, just wanted to say Merry Christmas early. LOL. Could you guys do a video on Romans 6:23? I have heard arguments saying that certain sins, swearing for instance, are not punishable by death. In my opinion, that means it's not a sin. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. It does not say the wages of certain sins is death, or the wages of only breaking the 10 Commandments is death. I have heard that the only sins God cares about are the 10 Commandments when it comes to judgment. I've heard the argument that Jesus cursed out the Pharisees when he reprimanded them, and so that means we can too, if using the words in context. I disagree with all of this, and I believe Christians should not swear at all. I believe if you wouldn't say it to Jesus' face, you shouldn't be saying it at all. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on this when you get a chance. Keep up the good work. Thanks. God bless. Well, God bless you too, man. Thank you for asking us that question. We are thrilled to talk about it today. So, swearing. This is a topic that a lot of people have been talking about. So, we're gonna talk about it today. So yeah. I don't know. I'll let you have the first word. Why don't you jump in?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to swearing, so many people have these different views, and I'll let you hit off these different views because I know that's your points.
Yep.
But first, we could just talk about maybe a verse that really references to swearing, because there's a lot of people in Christian culture who want to make an excuse for swearing.
Yep.
And you'll hit on that. I don't want to. I tend to really jump on your points a lot. So I'll let you have your points, and I'll let me have my own points. It's okay.
I jump on your points all the time.
But so, Ephesians 4. Let's just read this for you. Ephesians 4, verse 29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only sure as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Okay, so we have this command: let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. I mean, honestly, if we just boil it down to this, it can't get any plainer than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to swearing, or if it's crude joking or whatever it may be. It's very clear all throughout the Bible that we are to control our tongues. We are to control what comes out of our mouths, and we're going to talk about different views on swearing and how it all ties into all that. But first, I just want to bring that verse to you, and from the Bible's perspective, it is pretty clear that we as Christians are not to be going out cussing and being like the world, because this is what the world acts like. The world acts like this. Therefore, why should we act like that if the Bible clearly condemns that type of action?
Yep.
And I'll let you hit on your views.
Well, I think the biggest, most heated point of debate on this whole thing is what qualifies as corrupting talk. What qualifies as unwholesome talk? Like, is there some kind of like is there like some kind of part of the dictionary that's like marked in red and off limits to Christians? You know, like, is there like a lock over part of the dictionary, or does it depend on the situation? And I think that's really like that's where the rub is, and that's where these different perspectives that people have that I'm going to talk about are really going to come out. So you have a couple of different, and I'll give my thoughts on each one as I share it, and then I'll let you sound off on it after.
Yep.
But you have one group of people that basically would say that swearing or words that our culture, or some people in our culture, might identify as a cuss word is okay if you're using it for emphasis. And I like to call this wholesome swearing. That's what they might say, right? I'm kind of trying to steel man their position here.
Using it for like a specific point to
Yep.
prove a specific point.
For emphasis,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So like they would say, for example, that let's just say it. There is some weight to this point. Like, for example, what do you say? What is one word to describe someone who goes to hell?
Damned.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and that's a word that in some contexts would be, less so these days, but that doesn't change what's actually right and what's actually wrong, right? The culture thinks less so these days, but there are instances where that word would be called a swear word, right? You walk up to a Christian, you say, is this word a swear word? They'd say yes, right? A lot of them. But there's a context where they would say, oh no, in that context, it's not a swear word, right? What do we sing when what is that song? What is that song? What child is this? Right? Na 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 na.
You lost me, man.
Anyway, there's.
I never thought I'd hear you humming a song on this podcast, but here we go. You humming a song on the podcast. That's the first.
You don't want to hear that. That might qualify as that. That's almost just as bad as me swearing. Is me singing, right? I should have never done that. I should have never done that, right? Anyway, the whole point is there are instances where words used in a certain context, people would say, "Oh no, that's not a swear," and that's really the way that these people would think of it. And like recently, I'll just say it. There was an article that was released by a guy named Kevin DeYoung. Kevin DeYoung is a pastor, and he was reacting to Doug Wilson's church and his whole thing that he's got going on up in Moscow, Idaho. And Kevin DeYoung was critiquing what he called the Moscow mood. And I don't want this to take us too far afield either, but one of the things that he critiqued was Doug Wilson's use of words that most of the church would recognize as swear words. Doug Wilson's counter argument was, well, I'm using those words for emphasis. I'm using those words to make a point, to make, like you said, to make a specific point. Okay. And this is what I think about that view. And I think I think we share these thoughts, is that view, while I don't in my conscience, I can't justify using a swear word, right? I can't justify using a swear word in my ministry. However, I can see the reasoning behind that point, right? I can see the reasoning behind that logic. And that's not stopping us, either one of us, from wholeheartedly supporting the ministries of those who think differently on this issue than us, right? Like I'm not gonna go around like slamming Doug Wilson for using those words in certain contexts. I can see the reasoning behind it. The man's been in ministry for about I don't know, probably like twice as long as I've been alive. Yeah. He's 3 times the age of me. So I mean, so I'm not gonna go around saying that he's wrong to do that or something like that. I just personally couldn't, in my conscience, I'm not at a point where I can justify doing that. If that makes me the weaker, the Christian with the weaker conscience, fine, that's fine. But yeah.
And even Jeff Durbin, one of my favorites. One of my favorite guys.
Yep.
I listen to, and don't get me wrong, when I talk about Jeff Durbin, he is one of my favorite guys. I will stand for anything he says, basically. And he had one sermon, I think it was like woke church sermon or something like that.
He was going off on
he
something.
laid into it, man. It was really good. But he did mention a swear word. He said a theology, a bull. That's what the culture holds to. And he said the word, and it really shocked a lot of people. And I could see why. And he gave his reasonings as to why he said that, and the specific emphasis to make a point. And he brought up scripture that Paul even uses the word skubala, right? And Philippians, right? Philippians. Yeah. In Philippians, he uses that same word, skubala, which basically in the English language translates to shit.
Yeah.
So, and that's what Paul said. And even Ezekiel uses some pretty strong language. If you read the book of Ezekiel, he uses really strong language against Israel and and I'm not going to go ahead and say it because I know there's probably kids watching, but he uses very strong language. Yep. I'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
And yeah, so I agree with you.
Yep.
I totally support these guys' ministries. But I personally, in my own conscience, wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
I personally wouldn't do that.
Yep.
And even though I wholeheartedly agree with them in the gospel and evangelism, apologetics, even eschatology, I'm on board with everything.
Yep.
But just that one thing, I can't. I can't.
Right. And the other thing that I
I think it's more of a personal.
Oh yeah. The other thing that I will say, one thing that James White actually said, and I think he holds a very similar position. He's like, look, I agree with everything they're doing. He's like, you're not going to catch me swearing in a sermon or anything. Mm-hmm. He said, but that's not stopping me from supporting them. He's like, if that makes me the one with the weaker conscience, so be it. But one thing that James White said is he's like, I've hung out with the guys from Moscow. I've gone out to dinner with Doug Wilson. He's like, I've been in their homes and stuff. And he said, you're never going to catch these people just using this vocabulary as a manner of life.
That's the difference. Exactly.
They're not just like freaking out and just like lashing out all of a sudden. Right.
Yep.
And that's the difference.
Yep.
They're using it for a specific purpose. Okay. And so while I can't in my conscience justify it, I can understand that point of view. Mm-hmm. There's a second there's actually a couple other point of views. There's a second point of view, a second justification for swearing that people will use. And they may call it winsome swearing. And this comes from that third way type of crowd where you have to look like the world in order to win the world and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so in order to get someone to think the same way as you, in order to get someone to be a Christian, apparently you have to like cuss them out on the street first.
I wonder how that would go, like, you ever just think of that? Like, some of these people's views, man, I kind of just want to like, can you illustrate for me what that would look like?
Nope. No, I'm not going to illustrate that.
Oh, I'm talking to them. Illustrate to me what that would look like.
Yeah, please do. I want to know.
Because that just doesn't make any sense in my mind, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're going to a lost person who doesn't know Christ and you're going to give them the gospel. Mm-hmm. I think the last thing you want to do for them is act like them, is you want to, when you present the gospel to the lost, you, as Peter would say, when they ask you a question for the hope that is within you, and what's stirring that question? Well, it could be your own life. Your manner of life should stir a question in other believers that they're like, man, there is something different with this person, with this man or this woman that I need to go find out what's different about them, And so how are you going to witness to the lost if you're acting like them? I mean,
they're not going to see a difference.
Exactly.
They're not going to see evidence of a changed life. This is one thing that I don't know if you remember. A couple months ago, we did an episode about how there were Christians that were starting to swear in their songs.
Yes.
This was one of the justifications that they would use was, we have to sound like the world if we want the world to listen to our music and then come to Christ and stuff. And, really, if you're saying that you're a Christian and that you're that you're trying to win the world by talking like them, that's just not the way to do it. You're supposed to show what a changed life looks like. So this is different from the first point of view. I cannot even begin to support this line of reasoning. I think it is an abominable line of reasoning. It's terrible. The third type of cussing would be what I would call unhinged cussing.
I love the names you come up with, man.
I thought about it a little bit. I was gonna try to go with the 3 W's, right? So, but what did I say? Wholesome cussing, winsome cussing, and then I was gonna say wild cussing. I stuck with unhinged. I like that better. So here would be a good example of this, just to get it in your mind, something that you probably all know. You're probably familiar with the podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. We've said forever that we're going to react to that podcast. At some point we will. Anyway, there are problems on both sides of that issue. Mark Driscoll, I think they probably dragged him through the mud a little bit, but also Mark Driscoll has a lot of problems. So I think they use Mark Driscoll as like a reason to basically smash conservative Christianity, which was a bad idea. Anyway, Mark Driscoll was known in his heyday as the cussing pastor. And if you look at all,
that's terrible.
Yeah, well,
that's a terrible name.
I know you don't want to have that name. Yeah. If you look at not only his stories from his life, but also if you just start to listen to some of his disciples or some of the people that he's raised up, like, man, I'm not going to say every other word is like bleeped out on the podcast, but I was shocked at how often they were just bleeping out words like constantly. And that just tells you that's the type of cussing where it's just like, oh, whoops, it came out. Oh, whoops, it came out. Oh, whoops. That would be like if James White was able to follow Doug Wilson around and say, oh, wow, he's just like swearing in his own life all the time. Yeah. Right. But that's the idea here. Right. And that's why we love Doug Wilson, because Doug Wilson is showing by his character, by his life, that he's not speaking unwholesomely. Right. But a good counter example to that would be what we saw at Mars Hill with all the people that came out of there, where a lot of them would just get angry and they'd like cuss each other out and stuff,
That's just nuts. Yeah.
But anyway, so those are the people that would justify cussing, and those are the reasons that they would use. And there's one other group. We were talking about this before with someone else.
Yeah.
We have to address this. There are the people that are extremely Christians, that are extremely like legalistic about the things that they say, right? Like,
you can't say stupid.
Right, exactly.
I say stupid all the time, so you probably don't even watch this podcast.
Like it's used for like words that are used for emphasis. Like that's a great example. Another one would be like if you say that something is dumb, right?
Yeah.
I've heard people that don't like that word. They don't like to use that word. Well, if you're using it for emphasis, there's nothing wrong with that. So you don't want to be like hyper legalistic about it either, right? You don't want to be hyper legalistic about it. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, because look, God's given us freedom, right? We don't want to abuse that freedom. He's given us freedom within the bounds of what he has outlined for us to do, right? What he's given us freedom within the guidelines of the things of the Christian ethic that he's laid out. So you got to remember that you have freedom. You can't just be completely legalistic about it all the time.
Yeah. In the Bible, to make it even go further, the Bible uses words like stupid and dumb and fool and all these things, and even uses worse words. So to be so hyper legalistic to say, oh, you can't say the word stupid, that's stupid. Okay. that's stupid, because the Bible uses words like that in specific contexts and where it's necessary, honestly, because there are specific contexts where those words are really necessary, and I wanted to hit on the point, before we close on this podcast, there's 2 points I want to hit on. There's one that the guy William specifically addressed, which is 1 John 5, the sin that leads to death. I'll address that last.
Yep.
But I do want to address just one point on if you're struggling with this sin of cussing or swearing. It's just always on your tongue, right? Because there's so many Christians that I've known who have struggled with this. I myself, when I first became a Christian, I swore like a truck driver, who drove for a living. I mean, every other word, if I didn't have a swear word in my sentence, it was weird to me, okay? And so when I became a Christian, that was really hard for me to just let it go, because that was just my manner of life before I came to Christ, and I really struggled. But by the grace of God, I overcame, and now I don't use words like that. But if you're really struggling with this, I just want to point you to Proverbs 8, verse 13. And here's what it says. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. So here's what it says. So what is the fear of the Lord? It's hatred of evil. What does the fear of the Lord produce? It's hatred of evil. And now look at what it says. Pride, arrogance, the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. So what is the way in which you will stop swearing, in which you will stop cussing? It is when you have a greater fear of the Lord, because the greater you fear the Lord, the more you will hate your sin. That's exactly what the text is saying. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. The more you cultivate a greater fear of the Lord, you will have a greater hatred for sin and for evil, and you will flee from it. You won't even want to do it, right? And that goes for every other sin as well. And to just increase the fear of the Lord, listen to what Jesus said. Jesus said in Matthew 12, verse 36, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Man, that's some hard language right there. That's tough, right? On the day of judgment, you're going to give an account for every single word you speak. Don't think the Lord, even in your private conversations that you have with people, don't think the eye of the Lord doesn't see you, right? People think that, oh, if I'm not on a public stage and I'm not swearing, but I do it in private, it's okay. No. God sees your private sins, and you will give an account for every word. So that should instill the fear of the Lord in you to flee that sin and to pursue holiness and to conduct your mouth and speech in a God-honoring way that glorifies Christ. You want to say anything to that before I hop on to
I think, I'll make this quick, but like when you think about honoring God with your words, one of the best ways to not swear, to not cuss all the time, is to think about how can I honor God with my words. So it's like the cliff illustration, right? People look at the cliff, they say, well, how close can I get to the cliff before I fall off of it? Well, the question should not be that. It's, there's a cliff there. How far away can I get? Right? How far towards good things can I get? Right? How close can I get to the Lord? How close can I get to honoring the Lord with my words? And then you never have to worry about cussing. Right? You don't have to worry about that as much. Right? And so that means that even some kinds of swears, right? There are some words that you can use, or some phrases that you can use, or types of slander that you can have towards other people that's probably worse than swearing, right? Because it's not wholesome. It's not building people up, which is why, like with the Kevin DeYoung thing, he had so many other things he could have addressed with the Gospel Coalition, who he's really heavily affiliated with. And instead he goes after this little thing with Doug Wilson, So right. Anyway,
Yeah. And that's good, man. And to add even further to the point, I'm probably going to run out of time, but to add further on the point, it's not even just about stopping your swearing or stopping your cussing. It's also replacing that swearing with good language, right? So you don't just, it's like with your thoughts. You don't just stop those unwanted thoughts, but you fill your thoughts with the thoughts of Christ, with things above. So you have to replace that language with other language in order to fill that gap. Anyways, 1 John 5, right? The sin that leads to death. Everyone gets confused by this passage. Some people think that the sin that leads to death is only physical death, that it's sins that lead to for instance, the Lord's Supper, where people are partaking in the Lord's Supper, and some of them died because they were eating in an unworthy manner. So some people think that that's what that's referring to. But I really do think that this sin that leads to death, ultimate death, what I think this passage is saying is that in the context of the passage, right, John is addressing, and I got this from a Crossway article, I'll put it in the description, but John is addressing, in its specific context in the letter, John is addressing what are the fruits of a Christian, right? That he believes in Christ, that he loves his brother, and that he loves God, that he obeys God's commands, right? And so the sin that leads to ultimate death in the context of John's letter is not believing in Christ, not being a Christian. So if you reject Christ, you reject the gospel, that is the sin that ultimately leads to death. And we're not talking about physical death, we're talking about spiritual death, an eternal destiny separated from God. And so that's to answer your question. That was really quick, but I just want to get that in.
Well put. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.